If a behavior becomes automatic, are you still responsible for what it does? What if the cue was engineered, the reward was unpredictable, and the routine grew stronger during the most vulnerable period of your life? Would understanding the mechanism reduce blame? Or would awareness create a new obligation to change it? Hi, I'm Sarah, and this is Wise Mind Stories. Throughout this series, the power of habit has shown us that automatic behavior is real. Habits can run without full conscious attention. Some patterns become so powerful that the boundary between choice, compulsion, and responsibility becomes morally difficult. The final question is not whether habit influences us. It is what we owe one another once we know how that influence works. At 1:18 on a Wednesday morning, Leah Morales spun the Bright Cart prize wheel for the 43rd time. The wheel was part of a new loyalty program: complete an order, review a product, or open the app during a surprise window, and customers earned tokens. Each token produced a spin. Most spins delivered nothing. Some produced free delivery. A few offered grocery credit. One narrow gold segment promised a year of free groceries. The animation slowed near the gold segment, clicked past it, and stopped on "Try again tomorrow." Leah stared at the screen. Almost. She did not need groceries. She opened the sales section anyway. One more small order would earn another token. Leah had used Bright Cart for years without difficulty. 6 months earlier, her husband had died after a short illness. Friends filled her refrigerator during the first weeks. Then the visits became less frequent. Night became the hardest part of the day. At 11, Leah opened the app. The bright colors interrupted the silence. The wheel offered suspense. The near miss offered a reason to continue. Packages arrived the next afternoon, giving the empty house a knock at the door. The products mattered less than the sequence. Open, browse, order, spin, almost. For several minutes, grief became anticipation. By the time Leah contacted Bright Cart, she had placed 68 orders in 2 months. Some contained a single item. She had spent money reserved for property tax and hidden the boxes from her adult son. Her message reached Mara because it included one sentence the support system flagged. "I know this is my fault, but your app has learned exactly when I am weakest." Mara read the sentence twice. She asked Priya for the account history. The data showed a loop with painful clarity. Q. Late-night loneliness, amplified by surprise notifications. Routine, browse, order, spin, reward, stimulation, possibility, and a small interruption of grief. Craving, the near miss, the feeling that relief might be one action away. Bright Cart had not caused Leah's loss. It had not forced her to order. But the company had tested the wheel, tuned the animation, measured repeat behavior, and sent notifications at the time each customer was most likely to return. The growth report called this personalized re-engagement. Leah called it her weakest hour. When Mara confronted Theo, he pointed to the terms. The prizes were real. The odds were disclosed. Purchases were refundable. Customers could disable promotional notifications. "She made 68 separate decisions," he said. "Did she?" Mara asked. "The button did not press itself. Neither did our notifications schedule itself." This is where the moral question becomes difficult. An explanation can be used in two opposite ways. It can replace shame with understanding and reveal a path to change. Or it can become an excuse that removes all agency. If Mara said Leah had no control, she would deny Leah the possibility of rebuilding it. If Bright Cart said Leah had complete control, the company could ignore the architecture it had deliberately created. Responsibility was not a single object that had to belong entirely to one side. It could be distributed. Distributed responsibility is not diluted responsibility. If 5 people contribute to a harmful system, it does not follow that each owes only 1/5 of a response. Each person may hold a different duty. The designer can change the feature. The executive can change the incentive. The user can seek barriers and support. A clinician can address a disorder. A regulator can set limits where private restraint repeatedly fails. The mistake is to search for one guilty party so that everyone else can become passive. Who knew what? Who had the power to alter the cue? Who benefited from repetition? Who was vulnerable? And what became possible after the pattern was visible? The power of habit examines extreme cases behaviors such as pathological gambling and sleepwalking to ask when automatic action affects culpability. These cases are not identical. Medical, neurological, legal, and moral responsibility require different evidence and careful professional judgment. But the broader challenge reaches ordinary life. If you snap at someone from a practiced defensive loop, understanding the cue can explain the speed of the reaction. It does not repair the injury. If a platform uses behavioral science to hold attention, the user still has choices. The platform still has design responsibility. If a workplace rewards silence, an employee may fear speaking. Leadership still owns the routine it reinforces. Individuals still face moments when courage is possible and costly. Explanation should make responsibility more precise, not make it disappear. What habit in your life have you used to condemn yourself without understanding? What habit have you used understanding to excuse without repairing? Which cue can you control? Which cue belongs to a system more powerful than one person? And now that you can see the loop, what responsibility begins today? Mara called Leah. She did not give therapy, financial advice, or a speech about self-control. She apologized for the product design. Brightcart refunded unopened recent orders, disabled the wheel and promotional messages on Leah's account, and gave her a direct support contact. Then Mara asked, "Would you like us to block purchases overnight?" Leah said yes. The block alone would not address grief. Leah told Mara that her son was helping her find a counselor and that she had agreed to call him when nights became difficult. The replacement routine needed human support, not another app feature pretending to be care. Mara then proposed ending the prize wheel for every customer. The executive team refused. The program had increased order frequency by 14%. Mara presented Leah's case without identifying details. Legal argued it represented misuse, not the expected customer experience. Growth argued that removing a voluntary feature because some people struggled with it was paternalistic. Priya showed a wider analysis. Leah was not alone. A small group of customers spun late at night, placed unusually frequent low-value orders, and increased activity after near misses. The behavior was not proof of addiction or harm, but it was evidence that the reward design produced a different pattern in vulnerable users. The company knew enough to ask more. That changed its responsibility. Before the board meeting, Mara told Daniel what she planned to do. She expected encouragement. Instead, he asked what would happen if Brightcart accepted her resignation. "I don't know. Do you have another job?" "No." "Then this is not just your decision." Mara became defensive. For years, work had allowed her to feel decisive when family life required negotiation. Now, even the morally clear action belonged inside shared consequences. They reviewed their savings. They discussed what expenses could change and what fear each of them was carrying. June listened from the doorway and said, "If you leave because the app hurts people, that's different from missing dinner because a graph moved." The sentence was not permission, it was memory. Mara entered the boardroom knowing courage did not eliminate obligation to the people at home. She had prepared the risk with them instead of using principle as another reason to act alone. Mara thought about every lesson in the red notebook. The loop at 9:37. The craving created by an unfinished circle. The replacement routine that needed belief. The safety huddle that made hidden problems visible. The inflection point that required a practiced plan. The freezer crisis created by reasonable routines. The prediction that knew a life transition before a person chose to share it. The weekly walk that became a social identity. Habit was never only a personal productivity tool, it was a form of power. And power creates responsibility in proportion to knowledge and control. Mara gave the executive team a choice. Remove purchase-based spins, eliminate near-miss animation, add spending and time controls, suppress surprise messages during self-selected quiet hours, and create an independent review for features using variable rewards. Or accept her resignation and explain publicly why the company kept a system it knew could exploit vulnerable patterns. The room became silent. This was not a triumphant speech. Mara was frightened. She had a mortgage, a family, and a career built inside Brightcart. Moral action does not become automatic merely because the correct sentence sounds clear in a script. Even then, Mara almost softened the proposal. She had prepared a second slide that removed the resignation line and recommended another quarter of study. It was the professionally safe routine. Gather more evidence, reduce conflict, remain the reasonable person in the room. Then she recognized the cue senior skepticism and the reward her old routine promised: approval without immediate loss. Habit awareness did not tell her which moral choice was correct. It showed her the automatic escape she was about to mistake for careful judgment. The board paused the wheel. 2 weeks later, Brightcart replaced it with predictable loyalty credit earned through completed weekly orders. Engagement fell. Customer retention remained stable. The gold segment disappeared. Theo left the company 3 months later. Mara stayed, but the relationship changed. Some leaders saw her as principled. Others saw her as dangerous to growth. There was no clean ending in which accountability became universally admired. There was only a pattern interrupted after the people with power could no longer claim they had not seen it. To think about responsibility without collapsing into blame or excuse, use 4 questions: awareness, agency, architecture, repair. Awareness. When did the person or system become capable of seeing the pattern? Agency. What meaningful choices were available? And what limits made those choices harder? Architecture. Who designed, reinforced, or profited from the cue, routine, and reward? Repair. What must change now? Behavior, environment, support, restitution, policy, or professional treatment. Before awareness, a habit may be invisible. After awareness, responsibility is not always simple, but it is no longer absent. 1 year after the science fair, Mara sat in the same school auditorium. June was presenting a short film about the 19 Seconds campaign. The lights dimmed. Mara's phone vibrated once in her bag. Her body noticed. The old loop had not been erased. She placed one hand on the red notebook beside her and kept watching. On screen, Rosa and Sophia crossed beneath the new lights. Then Eli appeared, teaching a new supervisor the pause he had once failed to use. Then the East River team stood around the safety board asking what could hurt someone today. June's film ended with an empty crossing and a signal changing from red to white. The audience applauded. This time, Mara saw all of it. Habit does not remove human freedom, and freedom does not mean we act without influence. We inherit cues, we learn routines, we crave rewards. We enter families, companies, technologies, and communities that have been practicing patterns long before we arrive. But awareness creates an opening. Inside that opening, we can observe, replace, rehearse, redesign, ask for support, change the environment, challenge the institution, or take responsibility for repair. You are not guilty for every loop your brain learned before you understood it, but once the pattern becomes visible, you become a participant in what happens next. This is the end of our journey through the power of habit. If you arrived here first, the complete journey begins with Episode 1, Why You Keep Doing What You Promised to Stop. And if these stories gave you a new way to see your life, subscribe to Wise Mind Stories. You do not need another life. You may simply need another way to see this one.